About optimizing image size for web use. We're going to take a look at examples of a JPEG, which I found on designmyprofile.com, and this is the image that we're going to be playing around with a little bit. You can see that this image right here is actually 1280 by 1024, and I took this image, downloaded it to my computer, and created a little web page to show you exactly what I'm talking about with some of these things. So right here is the image. Again, it's 1280 by 1024. If I scroll down a little bit, took that exact same image and I told HTML that I want it to only show up as 400 by 320 pixels. And this is what I got in return. So my browser can actually take this image and shrink it down so it looks like this. The problem with this method is that this file will take exactly the same amount of time to download as this much larger file. The reason for that is the way that I coded this is that if I view the page source, the first image looks like this. Right, and so the source is the background.jpg. My second one has the same exact source, and then it specifies a width and a height. What this means is that when the server passes this file to my computer, it's still going to be exactly as big as this file because it's the same file. After I get this file, my browser will shrink it down to fit this. Again, the problem is that I'm downloading this much larger image to display a much smaller image. The more efficient way to do this is actually to shrink it, which I did, and created a background small.jpg, which is right here. And these two images look exactly identical. The difference with these, I can show you through the Finder, is that this is the background originally. It's a 1280 by 1024 file size with 292 kilobytes. Background small, I actually went into photo editing software and I shrunk this down to 400 by 320. So the image is already this small. And by cutting it down to this size, actually now have a 41 kilobyte file size, which is significantly smaller than this 292. And going back to this page here, this is going to download the entire 292 kilobytes, while this is going to download only 41. They're giving me the exact same result, except this one's going to download much quicker. So that's one of the most important things, especially when talking about things like thumbnails, that people can do to actually make web pages download significantly quicker. There are also online applications that can be used for different files to shrink them down. Here's an example of tinypng.com. And what this essentially does is it takes the original image that you put in and it finds colors that are alike in the image and it actually blends them together and makes them the same color. And the reason that this can work so well is because when it blends the colors together, it ends up blending them together with colors that are so close that the human eye really can't tell the difference between the two. So this image right here was blended. By blending it, there's a whole lot less information that this photograph has to store in order to look like this. And now that it's storing less information, I can display it at a much smaller file size, which means a much quicker download, but it still looks exactly the same to me. It's not the same, and if I really were to zoom in, download these images and zoom in, this one's going to look a lot more pixelated and a lot chunkier. But from back here and displaying it on the page, I really can't tell a difference. But I am saving a significant amount by using this application to shrink this down. And this is a free application that you can come in and you can upload a PNG or JPEG file and shrink your files. Another one that we're going to take a look at and play around with a little is webresizer.com. What I did here is I took this image, I took the smaller version of this image and I uploaded it, and here's the original image. It's 39.55 kilobytes, which is my 400 by 320 pixel image. So going down here, there's a couple of different options I can do, and right now what you're seeing is a 27% smaller file size. They pretty much look identical. I can't personally see a difference between these two images, but I am saving 27%. So instead of the 39.5 kilobytes, I'm down to 28.5, which is a pretty significant difference, especially when you're talking about big web pages. Every little bit can definitely make a difference. There's a couple of things I can do with this. I can sharpen this, which will actually make my end result a little bit bigger than it would otherwise, but it's still smaller than my original because it's still shrinking it and changing the image quality. Again, the image quality is basically taking pixels of similar color and kind of blending them so that there's less information for the computer to store about the image. So by sharpening this, you can see that it's a little bit bigger than it would have been if I didn't sharpen, and you can actually see in the image that it's a little bit sharper than this original one, which is kind of blurry. This may or may not be something that you are wanting to go for, but you can also play around with the image quality, and you can see when I change this to 70%, this is now 45% smaller than the original. If you take a close look at these, you can see a little bit of a difference between the two. This is 70% quality versus the original, and you can see a little bit of a difference, so depending on what you're going for, you may or may not want to go quite this far. Again, if we go back to the 80% and apply this, we're looking at a 27% difference, and visually they pretty much look identical. Again, I can't personally notice a difference, and if you can always go a little bit higher. I could take this up to, say, 85%. And this image quality is just saving you space, but not really losing much. You can also do this with an image editing software. So the example that I have here, this is the full size of my 1280 by 1024. I'm personally using Fireworks. You can do this with pretty much any image editing software. And I'll show you an example here. If I go to save this, I'm going to do save as. I'm saving it as a JPEG. Got my background here. And I've got an options thing here. And every application is going to be a little bit different. But if I click the options here, I can actually play around, similar to online. I can actually play around with the quality of this. So right now I have it set at 86%, but I can drop it down to 70% here. If I hit the 70% and I hit OK, I'm going to save this as background 70%. So if I save this JPEG, go back over to the Finder here. I've got my background here. Again, it's 1280 by 1024, and it's 292 kilobytes. Now, by saving this at 70%, I shrunk this down to 258 kilobytes. And again, it's not a huge difference, but when you're talking about specifically multiple images or big web pages, every little bit can make the download seem a lot quicker to the end user. And if I open these two up and compare them side by side, drag this one over. So the one in the back here is the 70%. The one up front here is 100%. If you look at the two side by side, you really can't see a difference. So I've saved a little bit of file size, but what the end user is seeing is pretty much identical. The only thing where this is not useful is if you're doing anything where you need to zoom in on the image at all. The bigger the image gets, the more pixelated it looks. So if I open up my regular background here and zoom in a bit, now this looks a little bit chunky coming in here, whereas with the 70% one, it gets chunkier a lot quicker. You can't see a huge difference between these two, but you can see that the 70% one starts to get a little bit chunkier in some areas. And these are really the biggest ways that you can start to save some file size when working with web images. Again, you can do this through applications such as Fireworks. You can use Photoshop, any image editing software that you're using. GIMP is on Linux. There's all sorts of stuff. You can also use these online compression applications to shrink down whatever files you're using. These are the two that I took a look at, but there's a whole bunch out there that you can find. And that's it. This is my introduction on how to optimize image size for web use.